Keith Deutsch.
My name is Keith Deutsch. First, I want to thank you for the invitation to speak today. It's an honor to be here. Memorial Day is meant to honor those who gave it all, gave their lives in service to our country. Obviously, I did not, but I did serve next to a very brave man who did. He was my squad leader, Staff Sergeant Mark Lawton. He was one of the greatest soldiers I ever knew, and today I want to share his story with you and mine. I can't tell one apart from the other because we fought together. And when I started in the Army, I was just a private. I thought I was defending freedom because our way of life is worth defending. It's not perfect, but nothing is. I understand perfection to be an illusion or a mirage. But in the United States, here in South St. Paul, Minnesota, we have a choice to play an active role and even change, be a part of progress. It may not be perfect, but we can change what we don't like. We were born with that right, and men like Sergeant Lawton died to defend it. Most of all today, I'm here to inspire you not to waste that opportunity, because today is Memorial Day. Today we remember those who gave it all in the line of armed service to our country. They died on beaches, in deserts. They died in certain indefinite misery. They died lying face down in the mud and sand next to their friends, thousands of miles away from their families and thousands of miles away from here. They died for our freedom and for us to have the right to change what we don't like about our country. We often call people like these heroes. I've known a few of them in my life so far, and when I face a struggle in life that I don't know how to overcome, I often consider my heroes, and then I simply fake it. Because heroes don't wake up heroes every day. Most days they're just regular people like you and I. If you don't have a hero to consider in your time of trouble, I'm gonna let you borrow a story from one of mine. And I'm so excited and grateful to share the story with you because it's one of my favorites to tell. Today I'm talking about Staff Sergeant Mark Lawton. Don't you just love it when the protagonist's name represents an attribute of their character? Lawton. If he were a character on a page, you just know he'd be the protagonist. It lets you know he's the good guy. Staff Sergeant Lawton was a good guy. He's the reason I wear a Western hat a lot. I'm not authorized to wear a cavalry hat, like Staff Sergeant Lawton was. It was just another one of his past units. He served all over the place. He was a real war dog. He started as a Marine. Believe it or not, the Army was supposed to be his retirement gig. I wear mine to remind me of what he did for me. Staff Sergeant Lawton wore his with pride in his eye like it was his child. He would lift up the back of it and look down at me across the bill whenever he had to do anything disciplinary like a drill sergeant would. He was a great leader and the most capable soldier I ever met. He taught me to lead from the front, leading always and only by example. Never leaving that post. From the day I met him and every day I knew him, he was a better man than me. He learned the job of the person in front of him, and he taught his job to the person behind him. He demanded a lot of his soldiers. He held us to a higher standard than others, and he demanded a higher standard than us, and he demanded himself to a higher standard than us. He also demanded each of his soldiers answer the question, why? Why are you here? And he explained his answer to us. To him, the answer was threefold. First, he served for Sherry and his two boys, Dustin and Tanner, because they were worth defending. Second, he was there for me and for our brothers and sisters in arms. Because he had experience in war, he felt a duty to lead the next generation of soldiers into the fight to ensure that as many of them made it back as possible. And I'm here today to tell you that he died with a perfect record. He was the only one KIA in my unit. Third, he was there for you. Mark believed that because he was strong enough and possessed the experience in fighting, that it was his duty to fight and then to lead the fight for those who had other forms of strength, because that's what makes this country so great. My answer to the question why is easy to see here today. This place right here is the answer for me, being up on this stage, my daughter watching. Ava, give a wave. I love you more than life, honey. It's the ground under our feet. For me, it's the ground under our feet. My reasons are sitting right next to you today. After I pass on, it's what I'll leave behind. It's written on the water tower and likewise across the country. Sergeant Lawton wasn't even supposed to be deployed with us. He simply found his way into the first unit he could find his way into that was about to leave. When he heard fire, he ran towards it. It just wasn't in his character to quit. And he's the reason I don't run. August 29th of 2003 was a hot day in the desert. We had been tasked to move our heavy construction equipment to the next waypoint on the GPS. That meant a convoy. I was a private, however, I never saw a map, I just did what I was told. As our squad's machine gunner, I often tagged along on convoys in order to provide extra firepower, and so extra security for the convoy. That day, I was our rear security, in the rear of the trailing vehicle with my machine gun pointed backwards. Any attack coming from the rear would have to get through me first. As we traveled along in combat convoy formation, bumper to bumper, my weapon rested on the tailgate of the 2.5-ton six-wheel drive truck I was riding in. If my nautical terms are correct, and they might not be, the fire came from our starboard side. The racket of small arms fire was all too familiar by this point, although I never really quite got used to it. It was always jarring. It took on a new meaning in war, made you immediately get small, find cover. I was already returning fire before I saw where it was coming from. My training was in the front of my mind, telling me not to let go of more than 3 to 5 rounds at a time, because the constant muzzle flash could identify to the enemy that I was the machine gunner and make me the #1 target. And I've got to imagine that's about what happened. I remember a ball of light coming on fast approach. It was a rocket-propelled grenade, or an RPG for short. It hit the tailgate where my weapon was resting. And this is a poem about the event. I apologize for putting you through it. Boom. I'm hit. I could not hear, I could not smell. My senses, they'd all gone somewhere else. I was here now, still was I there, how? No sound at all from anywhere now. Where's my weapon? Oh no, oh no. But still I cannot see my foe. My senses had yet to return, still could not hear, felt a slight burn. I'm sitting in a puddle now, my mind, it's all a fuddle how. My right leg trapped, still I can't see. Why am I wet? Did I lose my pee? My vision comes back, I almost wish it didn't. What's left of my leg had been torn to ribbons. The puddle is blood, my blood, oh. I cried to my friend, Big Mac, I'm hit. His reaction was quick, stop bleeding, do triage. My mind just a blur, no shape but a mirage. My first surprise, vision sorted out, no fear of demise, this will hurt no doubt. I was already wondering how I'd snowboard without. I apologize, when emotion gets the best of me, I break down into terrible poetry. My vehicle stopped. I was unloaded and loaded into the back of another truck. It was some kind of Humvee-like thing with 2 vertical bunks in it. I was put onto the bottom bunk while I noticed there was already somebody on the top bunk, and they weren't paying them much attention, which probably meant their outcome wasn't good. So all their attention was on me. But I thought that I saw them load somebody before they put me on, so I started asking as we hit the road. Who's up there? No one, Deutsch. Concentrate on you, Private. You're strong, Private. Keep fighting, Deutsch. You're gonna make it, Deutsch. Stay with us, Deutsch. Their pleading with me to stay with them, Deutsch, was getting harder and harder to hear about the pain. It only grew. I was on fire. Every cell in my body was on fire and reporting so at once. I didn't think pain could get so intense. It was the hardest time in my life and I almost gave up. I almost quit. I was running out of energy, out of blood, out of life. And that's when Sergeant Lawton saved me. As we hit another agonizing bump, the arm of the person in the top bunk hung loose and fell limp in front of me just for a second before the medics dressed it back at his side. But I identified it before it came to rest. His hand was so familiar to me I knew it immediately. I knew it as I knew my own. I saw it in the dirt next to mine every time we challenged each other to do push-ups. He was my age, he was 41 when he died, but he could do push-ups for days. I once knew the taste of his hand as he fish hooked a chew out of my mouth when I showed up to it in formation with the still in my lip. When I saw his wedding band, I may well have seen his face. Knowing he was gone is what ignited the familiar fear and fire inside me that kept me alive. It was the same fire that allowed me to finish my first marathon after Dad died. The same fire that led me to the Winter X Games wearing prosthetic legs. The same fire I had come to recognize as the call. When I saw his arm come down, in that moment I knew he was gone, and that's what kept me from death. I used to have nightmares about his hand. I spent years that turned into decades trying to erase that memory from my head, until I realized what he had done for me. If Mark hadn't showed me that he was gone, I probably wouldn't be here. I would surely have given into the pain, but now I hold that memory of Mark dearer than any other of him. And I wanted to share it with you in hopes that it inspires you to remember why he did it. I wanted to invite you to let his story inspire you in those moments when you've run out of patience. I invite you to think of Staff Sergeant Lawton like I do when things seem heavy and life seems too real. Consider what he went through and what he did for us, all to ensure that we would be safe, that others would be safe. Sergeant Mark Lawton died for his wife Sherry and his sons Dustin and Tammy. Sergeant Mark Lawton gave his life for his brothers and sisters in arms. I believe his last move on earth was to save my life. Staff Sergeant Mark Lawton also gave it all for all of you here today, for those who aren't here, and for those who would have loved him, and for those who would have argued against him. And he's just one name among millions of names who believe the same thing, that when times get tough, we need to remember that in America, in South St. Paul, Minnesota, we may not be perfect, but we have the power to change what we don't like. I want to thank the veterans in the room and give a special thanks to all the Gold Star families out there. Be safe and God bless America.